Welcome to the Courageous Caribbean Woman podcast. I'm your host, Fralene Wilkins. Join me in this interview with a fellow Caribbean woman as we motivate and inspire you to unleash your own courage. Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Courageous Caribbean Woman podcast. I'm so excited to have with me here today Miss Akenna Kublal. She's the founder of the Labor of Love Women's Empowerment event and the Akenna Kublal Events and Personal Development Agency, as well as an author, a public speaker, an advocate, and a mother of two beautiful girls. She uses her platform to bring awareness to the rare condition of vitiligo. And so, Akenna, we're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Fralene. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Okay, so usually I like to start these conversations with my 5 favorite questions, just so that I could get to know you a little bit better and the audience as well. So
Awesome.
first off, would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
I think I'm a little bit of both. There's a word for that, right? I can't remember the word right now, but I'm a bit of both. Yeah, I'm a bit. It depends on the mood. It depends on the environment, the crowd. When I was young, I was very introverted, so much that when I got older, people that knew me from childhood would be like, "Oh my gosh, you always used to be inside."
Okay.
I guess with time, I had to be forced to become an extrovert because of my career and that kind of thing. So definitely both.
Okay, good. Which is a common response that I seem to be getting with my guests, right? It's just kind of like, oh, I'm more to the introverted side, but I could be extroverted when the time is right. Okay. Do you have what do you enjoy doing in your downtime? Let's go there. What do you enjoy doing in your downtime?
Lately, I have really been enjoying just reading and sitting in silence.
Okay.
Funny enough, just doing nothing. I think in the past, I would always attach an activity to downtime. And I always felt like, okay, I had to have something to do not, in that free time, else I wasn't using the free time well. So there was like this guilt associated with just doing nothing. But lately I'm learning to embrace just sitting in silence, reading, having a good book, a cup of tea, or a glass of wine, depending on the day of the week.
Yes.
and reading.
Good. What are you enjoying right now in terms of reading?
I'm reading. I'm not sure if you're one of those readers that read about 3 or 4 books at the same time.
Okay.
And then sometimes you never finish one.
Yeah. Sometimes.
I'm reading a couple of books right now. One of them is a book called Difficult Conversations. So it talks about how to have difficult conversations, how to respond to them and things like that. And I'm also trying to reread a book called Yesterday I Cried by Iyanla Vanzant. It's actually my favorite book. I read it from her many years ago, but I'm rereading it now. And I'm also reading, well, this is via audiobook, Pastor Stephen Furtick's new book called Doing the New You, I think it is. I have that on Audible that I'm listening to.
Okay, excellent. Sounds good. I'm familiar with the first one. Yes. Yeah. I'm familiar with the first one, but not the two, but sounds good. And I know exactly what you mean. It's like, okay, I'm going through several books because I just feel like, oh my gosh, I want to know the content from this one and this one and this one. And so you kind of move around. Or sometimes you read in one for too long and it kind of get like, okay, I'm ready for another mix. And then I'll come back to that. Yeah. So I totally get it.
I tend to always have a book in my purse. So that might be one that I'm reading if I'm in the car, if I'm going somewhere, sitting somewhere waiting. So that one doesn't really come out the bag to get read in that free time, but that's one of them is like, okay, if I end up somewhere, maybe if I don't want to talk to somebody, I just pull out the book.
Right. Okay, good stuff. All right. Do you have any siblings? And if yes, how many?
I do. I'm the oldest of 6, but it's divided. So there's 2 others on my mother's side, and then there's 3 others on my father's side, but I'm the eldest to both my parents.
Look at that. I've always sort of, felt lucky to be the youngest one because I feel like the eldest position comes with so much responsibility. Yeah. What do you think about that?
That's so true. So true. And my older daughter, she would agree as well. She's always comparing her journey to her younger sister, and it's like you met mommy at a different place in her life, you know. I feel like the older one has to deal with all this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's just like, I'm learning, I'm just doing this for the first time. Okay, that's cool. And so what is the one thing that you would say you love about your job?
I love my flexibility. Absolutely, my flexibility. I came from a background in aviation that was very kind of it was flexible. You had that flexibility. It wasn't like a regular 9 to 5, but it was also something that didn't have much wiggle room. When you have to work, because there is a lot of ripple effects that can happen just by one person not showing up or one person being late, that kind of thing. So now that I'm no longer in that career, I just love the fact that my time is flexible now. If I feel to go with my laptop on the beach, I could do that. If I feel to, do whatever, I just love that. Yeah. Flexibility.
Excellent. Good. And if you had the power to revisit, like go back to the past, or go on ahead and see the future, right? I mean, when you go back to the past, you could change the past. Which one would you pick and why?
I want to go forward. Want to go forward because people always say this and it sounds so cliche. Like, if I go back, I would never change. Yes, there are things I think if I go back, I could change, but I think I'll be so afraid as to that might impact some of the good things. Maybe that's Marvel watcher in me. They always like, if you change the past, it will affect even now.
Oh, for the future,
So I want to go to the future to see, like, did I make it?
Right.
Yeah. Did all
the
things
really turn out? Yes, absolutely. Love that. Again, a very common response as well. So good. So today, that I brought you on for us to have this conversation around beauty standards. And of course, it's aligned with your diagnosis and your own work, the work that you do, in trying to help women sort of understand their self-worth, their true self-worth, and basically to know that there's purpose to their pain, right? Good. And so take us back to when it is you found out about your diagnosis and what the impact that had on your life.
Yeah. Well, when people meet me for the first time, they're always very surprised when I tell them I was not born with vitiligo. I think on a Zoom call like this, you can't really fully see my body, but if you would look here, for example, this is my hands. Maybe, I don't know, I'm sure if you'll put a picture of me into this podcast. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can.
This is just my hands, and I have vitiligo on about 80% of my body. So on my legs, my back, my upper body, lower body, even my ears, in my scalp, everywhere. And I've only had it for about 5 to 6 years now. I did not have it all my life. I wasn't born with it. I'm not sure that there is anybody within my family that has it. At least in the immediate family, there is nobody.
Right.
So there is the element of it being hereditary was not there. And it really wasn't something that I even knew about before my diagnosis. So a couple of years back, I was working as a flight attendant, and I got called out to work. I fell on a flight and I had knee surgery. I had to come off the plane in a wheelchair and do the whole shindig. Had a couple knee surgeries done, more than one. And it was during that time that I was on injury leave, not working, is when I started to see the vitiligo appearing. Very, very small, almost as though, sometimes if you're frying something and oil splatters on your skin, a few days later, I might see a little white dot, but it would fade away.
Right.
So I thought maybe that was what it was, because I'm always in the kitchen, things like that, right? I noticed with time that it started to get bigger, and the spots now started to widen, and then my lips started to get whiter. So obviously I went to a dermatologist, and the dermatologist then confirmed that it was vitiligo, which is when I learned that vitiligo is an autoimmune condition that in some people is triggered by stress.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
So even within that time too, I was also in a very difficult relationship, marriage. I'm now divorced and all of that. So I think all the things in one took a toll on my body. And what vitiligo does is that your cells, your melanin attacks itself. So the melanin now starts to fight against each other. It's like, I don't know you, I don't know you. And then now they just kill out each other, they die out. And then you end up with no melanin. So it was very challenging for me because, again, here I am in a job where image is the number one thing, and this is all I wanted to do all my life. It was something that I had to really do a lot of work to get to, and it goes back to when you asked me about if I was an introvert or an extrovert. Vitiligo and that diagnosis is really what made me become an extrovert without having to choose, because now I can no longer hide. I would be in a crowd of hundreds of people, and people will automatically identify me because there's something different about me that they would automatically stay. And it's just taken me on a journey ever since. A difficult one in the beginning because I had to do a lot of work as a woman in the Caribbean who, one, this wasn't really that common 5-6 years ago for people to start talking about this vitiligo. Two, I was in a career where image was a big deal. And three, I just didn't know what would happen because vitiligo is not something that you can predict. Over time, it could spread. Sometimes people repigment, and there are also no known cures for it. There are creams and stuff out there that would sometimes make you repigment, but then within a 3 or 6 months of stopping using them, you could depigment again. And then your body now can also become addicted to these steroids because most of the creams are steroidal creams. And then if you stop using it now, there is something called topical steroid withdrawal that now you could start to. So it is just, it was something crazy. Then you have to deal with the questions from family members who haven't seen you in a long while. You know, what happening to your skin? I had people, you know, say some really mean things. I don't think they intentionally meant it, but you know, Caribbean people. Why you so fat, girl? I ain't seen a long while. This now, people are like, as Caribbean people, they're like, oh, you ain't find that looking like a cow. Come to your hand, girl. You'll be a white lady just now, you know, all these things. While I'm already now challenged with, okay, I don't even know what is going to happen to me. How am I going to continue to, how am I going to feel looking at myself? And then I have children. So my daughters as well too had to go through this with me. There was one time when my youngest, she was asked in school, what happened to your mommy's skin? And she was like, you know, mommy, every time you come to pick me up, children always asking me what happened to your skin. Could you stop coming for me? And that really hurt me. I broke down crying, but it wasn't that she didn't think that I was beautiful. They always like, you know, promoting me. Now she's older. You can't say those things about her mommy. But back then she just didn't want to be bothered. She just like, I just want to come to school. I don't want you always asking me what happened to my mommy's skin. It has really been a journey that God has had us on, and it has, in spite of the challenges, really opened up a lot of doors for me to just meet some amazing people, to be able to encourage not only adults but young people to have met children that have vitiligo, been able to talk to them about it. And it's been challenging, but I don't want to sound cliche, it's also been a blessing.
Right. I completely understand that. And from what you're saying, this, of course, this is a big change, a major change. It's one of those changes that you can't hide, like you said, right? You can't hide. You know it, you see it, you are reminded of it every time you look at yourself. And then other people know that this change is happening. It's different from another condition that people might not know, you know, happening. In fact, sometimes initially you might not be able to tell that a person have cancer, for instance, right? And that could just be their private sort of struggle. So now here you are having to go through this whole transition with eyes on you, right? So like you said, I could understand just the weight of that. On top of that, your children and the dynamic is changing for your children as well, right? Like in school, as you mentioned. And so for you, what are some of the things that you said, like you did in order to cope with this change?
one of the things that I did intentionally was start seeking out like resources. And thankfully, a few years after I got diagnosed, COVID happened, right? So with COVID now, everybody was online. And you started to see meetings popping up for everything. Bible study all around the world. Meetings for this, meetings for that. And I think I was subscribed to a couple of Vitiligo pages on Instagram, and they had a virtual meet and greet. And I signed up for it. There were people on that meeting from all around the world. And I just connected with one of the women from that group who happened to be the founder of a group called Vit Friends, and she's from St. Thomas.
Okay.
So we kind of, it was the first time that she had met anybody, like younger and stuff from the Caribbean that had vitiligo, and she's in the US from the Caribbean too. So we connected, and that's how the relationship really happened. So it's kind of, ironic that this podcast is the Courageous Caribbean Woman podcast. Because had it not been for that Caribbean woman that I found online in the US, I didn't even find her in the Caribbean, but she saw me, had my back, because she's now fully depigmented. So if you see her, she no longer has any more pigment, and she was an even darker shade of brown than me. But if you see her, it's like a complete just like how Michael Jackson completely depigmented, it's completely like that. And a few years later, her husband, who did not have vitiligo before, got it as well too. Now, there are no studies that prove that vitiligo is contagious, but it just happened for them. So she really, really helped me. She introduced me to people all around the world, virtually, of course. And in 2020, I think it was 2022, they invited me to come to the World Vitiligo Conference to speak to women there about how it was for me as a Caribbean woman dealing with this, So people, community is what helped me. I can't say anything else. Definitely community. And of course, my faith, but really community. It showed me how important it is for people to have people who walked a similar road than you. Because my family, friends, people, I could have told them how much times that I'm dealing with this. They would say, girl, don't study that. I even had a friend who said, girl, don't study that. At least you're still nice. So I'm like, so what you trying to say? That if I was ugly, like ugly people, what are you trying to say? Then there were people who were like, don't study that, and again, Caribbean language, we often very nonchalant about emotional things. So it's definitely community, without a doubt.
Yeah, I like that because recently, yesterday, in fact, I was looking at a podcast episode, and the presenter, she was talking about a study that they did where there's a friendship recession happening right now after COVID and so on, and how that affects your health. And even like people who have friends and so on, they tend to have better health later on in their life, right? And so I really emphasize the importance of community, because it's oftentimes overlooked, right? It's oftentimes overlooked, and people kind of think, oh, I could just do me and do whatever, and I don't have time and so on. But it is important for us to even carve out the time for that. And so for you, it's like, hey, here's this thing that it's interesting, because it's like it sort of separated you initially, because hey, here's it, that whole set of people like staring and so on. But as a result of going through this, you ended up being part of different communities and connecting with other people having a similar experience. So that's really interesting.
That I would have never met had I not had it.
Yeah. So look at that. So sometimes, I mean, not to sound weird, because I don't want to say it like, oh, you sort of need to connect around your challenges necessarily, because that could get toxic and weird. But it's a reminder that you're not the only one. Because sometimes we go through life like that, thinking that, feeling that way, and then shame would come on, right? We'd experience a whole lot of shame. But even just knowing, hey, this is an experience that other people have. How are they coping? How are they dealing? What can I learn from them that helps? And you could extend more compassion towards yourself.
That initial meeting too that I had, was the first time that I had heard anybody else say that, because I used to feel bad for thinking that, okay, I have this condition that is not really affecting my health, but there are people dealing with, other things. It was during the pandemic too. So people dying. I felt really guilty to say that I'm struggling with this. But when I realized that if you even look up studies, they said that people who have vitiligo have extreme psychological issues and suicide, depression, things like that. So going to that initial meeting and hearing, wow, like I don't need to feel guilty for feeling this way. This is how people actually feel. It really showed me that not only is it okay for us, like it's good for us to have community, but also to be like honest and authentic with people as well, because sometimes you might be thinking you're putting up a strong face for the world, but that is not doing everybody else good, because the people who might be really still struggling, they're feeling like, I can't be like this person, I can't be this strong, I can never that place, and then they end up just carrying on that facade all their life until one day they'll crack.
Precisely, you're so right, and it doesn't do them any good, neither yourself, right? If it is that you're just struggling in silence, and sometimes even when we try to put up a strong face also, you sort of take away the help that you can actually get. Right? Because then people end up thinking, oh, she's fine, look, this is how she's moving, these are all the things that she's doing, and so on.
It's like closed mouths don't get fed.
Exactly. Right. So that's really interesting and really cool that community came out of this, as a result of just even being, I guess, alone in the experience, meaning in nobody in your immediate family, right? And so you are sort of the only one sort of going through this, but you got community in the end. And so now, in terms of now, when we think beauty, right? Because we're talking about beauty standards and so on, and you were, like you said previously, in a career space that really emphasized that. How did your thoughts around beauty change from like when before vitiligo to now?
It's changed tremendously, because I think since I've gotten vitiligo and all those years, I pay more attention now to who people are versus not only how they look, but what they say. And it's not something that I think I paid much attention to in the past. And I know that sounds so like silly to say, right? But
no,
a lot of times we judge people by the way that they look. It's true. When I remember when I was flying, I loved pulling my suitcase in the airport and looking like that, looking all dainty and pretty and this and that. But I was dealing with a lot of things inside. I was hiding a lot of things that I was dealing with personally. And I really believe that God had to allow me to go through this process to see what I was doing to myself. So now I found too that it's also not just changed my perception of beauty, but it's also kind of challenged me to do better as it pertains to the next generation. I do a lot of workshops with young girls now, where I would talk to them about just knowing who you are, becoming confident, and having good etiquette, teaching etiquette, but also I teach them the foundation of etiquette is just being considerate of another person. So it's simple thing, if you go to have a meal, the reason why you are acting the way that you act around the table is not just really to look fancy, but it's because you want to make the dining experience comfortable for the next people, the other people at the table. So it's really kind of just made me a bit more, I guess, aware of the importance of just being a good, wholesome human being. At your core, not just saying I'm a good person, but at your core, just being a good person. When you say love people, truly mean it. Treat people well, and that kind of thing. Because this is not gonna last. Even if you don't get vitiligo, you're gonna get old one day. You're not gonna And if we put especially in 2024, everybody now doing some procedure, some nip, some tuck, something somewhere. And I think especially young women, they've lost the value and the essence of what it means to truly be a beautiful woman. It has nothing to do with the outside.
Right. So a few things kind of came up for me because you mentioned first you going through this experience would have caused you to really see people, right? Interesting fact about me. I can't see from my right eye. I can't, right? And yeah, and at some point I was telling God, hey, I was saying, I think if I didn't have this situation happen to me, I might have been super vain. But what happened is that it caused me to look beyond a person's exterior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it's so like, so when you said that, I got chills. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's kind of like just the same messaging we sort of ended up coming around to, right? So has that, but also it started to make me think about, did you notice a shift in your parenting? Especially because you parent girls, because you say you work along with girls and teaching them about, their appearance, self-worth, and so on, and finding out who they truly are. How did Vitiligo shift your parenting? And how did you notice any changes in terms of how your daughters kind of talked about themselves, or even their friends and other people and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I always tell people it makes no sense I'm doing all these things on the outside if the two women in my home are not like,
right.
I'm having women empowerment events, but the two
Right.
women at home, like we don't even talk. They're not even, they're
Right.
girls, but they will be women one day. And
Correct.
a simple thing as being aware, even in the very early of how I spoke about myself. I think one of the reasons why I pushed myself to get to this place now, it was because of them. I never wanted them to feel like if something was to happen to them, for example, God forbid you fall, you get a scar on your face, something happens to you. Or what if you get vitiligo? I don't want you to feel like your life is going to come to an end. That does not change who you are. So I realized that I had to not just say it, but I had to walk it. Because if I didn't, then they would not feel, they would realize that it's just a fake thing. So it changed how I parented for sure. I did not really grow up having the best relationship with my mother. She grew up in an orphanage and had that own story of her own. So growing up, our home was more or less just, very based on doing the right things. She's a great mother. She taught us what she knew, but we never really had that emotional connection. And I always said, when I have children, boys or girls, I want to do better than that. Even if I didn't know it, I would have to teach myself these skills. And it was hard. It was hard. It was hard. It's still hard. I have a teenager and have some days I have to bite my tongue and be like, oh gosh, child.
Yes.
But through therapy and just, reading and stuff, I think Caribbean mothers, we have unfortunately not always been given the best examples, especially Black Caribbean mothers.
Right.
And we have to first be willing to admit that that is the truth. We see it all the time. I always see this guy, Certified Samson. He always makes these videos of him, right? You see it, right? And his mother.
Yes,
his mother. And I saw he did one just this weekend where they went to church and mommy was quarreling with him because of what he wears, like embarrassing me. And I'm like, at least he went,
Yeah.
So I think it's important for Caribbean women, especially Caribbean mothers, to one, admit that we probably didn't get the best example all the time, but we have to want to admit that and do the work that it takes to do better. It might mean buying a book on parenting. I had to buy a lot of books on, raising girls and things like that, getting a therapist, seeking advice, and things like that.
Good. Yes. Well, for me, I'm all for therapy and stuff, and it does make a significant difference in your life, and reading as well. Like, acquiring that knowledge is definitely helpful, and having a therapist as a guide, right? So you could come to certain insights much faster than if you were to go at it alone. And then you mentioned the motherhood and so on. My understanding as well is that you also have a book geared towards mothers.
Mothers,
right?
So that book really came out of my journey with divorce and just starting over on the whole. I got married pretty young, early 20s, to my daughter's father. It was the only relationship that I ever knew from the age of 17. So my entire life was built around that. And I recognize that a lot of women sometimes, when you're in a position of starting over, it doesn't only have to be divorce. During the pandemic, a lot of people lost spouses. Sometimes starting over could mean from your career, things like that. So I found that there was not much things out there to help women in that starting over phase. And I just wanted to share my story, things that helped me, simple things that helped me. Because I knew that it wasn't easy for me. It's still not easy. I'm still in that process of starting over or continuing along that journey. But that's really where that came from.
Yeah. And what would you say if you could share like one thing that helped you? Because around the conversation around being courageous as of it's having the courage to even start, right? So what would you say? Okay, here's one thing that helped me to just start over.
It was time recognizing that my eldest she's going to be 16 this year. And I didn't know when that happened. I was like, what? When did, like you always say time waits on no one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But just recognizing that we lost so much time during COVID. And just like that, like time just took off. So it was really time. And I think too, I put a lot of my dreams on the back burner.
Right.
But for years, I was always very career and goal oriented. But it was a lot of times sometimes being career oriented doesn't necessarily mean that you're focusing on your goals. Sometimes you just get a job, the job paying you, and you're like, I'm gonna stay in this because it can stand and it's what you know.
Yeah.
But I wanted to really to go after my goals. And I have it was a pastor at the time. His wife was very young and she had 2 children in her 30s, my age, and she died suddenly. And that really impacted me. Like it shook me to my core. We were not that very close. But when she died, I think, sometimes people just pass away and it just affects you.
Yeah.
It really affected me. It really, really did. And I was like, you know what? I need to,
do something. So that's interesting. So to start, because even around strategy, right, that could cause us to instill within us the courage to take certain actions and so on. Okay, and so if we have a listener who might be experiencing challenges in terms of meeting the beauty ideals, right? They don't feel like they're enough or they're not pretty enough and so on. And even teenagers, because we see a lot of that with them as well. What advice would you give to someone like that?
Well, I get invited a lot to secondary schools to speak to young people and young girls especially, because I feel like one of the reasons maybe teachers and stuff do that is because they tend to notice that these young girls, they look for that affirmation in boys or things like that the outside. So for any young girl that happens to come upon this video, or even, anything, I would want to just tell them that you are enough. You don't need anybody else's, validation to tell you that. Regardless of, you might feel like this isn't straight, that isn't thing, comparing yourself, because that's another thing that we as women do. We compare ourselves a lot. But you'll be surprised at that person that you're comparing yourself to. If you can get a glance of their private life, what they might be going through at home, you would realize that it's maybe I don't think I might want that person's life. So I always try to encourage young girls to, one, try to, as best as you can, not look for that validation in boys and men, and two, defeat that desire to compare yourself. And one of the ways that you do that is by sharing stories. I found that when we share our stories as women, it sort of removes that comparison. It's like, you have so much more empathy. You give each other so much more grace. It creates space for that whole, I guess, empathy. I use that word again, for empathy to grow.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer looking at each other like an enemy then.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So like, and that makes perfect sense, because I like to say, basically, we sometimes, when we compare our life to somebody else's, what we are comparing is our behind the scenes. So if you're creating a movie, it's our behind the scenes with their finished movie production, right? And because we know our behind the scenes, we somehow think that, their life is better just from seeing the finished movie, but we don't get a glimpse behind that, unless of course they share their stories, like you said. And sharing stories will call for that vulnerability, and that vulnerability is important for connection. We're afraid of it, right? But we do look for it in other people. And then once we get a hit of vulnerability in somebody else, then we start to feel more comfortable in being vulnerable ourselves and actually start sharing, so we can feel connected and, like you said, build that community. And as we're talking about community and so on, I would actually say, I don't know if you know how I came to learn about you.
Oh, tell me.
No, yeah, because it's actually through another community. I was on a boot camp with Dr. Darius, and I was just scrolling, Dr. Darius Daniels.
Yes,
And I
remember.
was right, yes. And so in the boot camp, of course, we have homework, so you will see other people's lives and so on. And then I think maybe the song was on, and I heard the accent, and I was surprised. I was like, "Ah, this is a Trinidadian person speaking," yeah. And then I was like, oh, let me check out all the stuff like that. And I could tell some promotion was going on for your Labor of Love event. And so I was like, oh, let me check it out. And then I ended up attending the retreat. That was so beautiful. And so you got help through community, and and I met you through another community, and then you then created the Labor of Love event. So tell us a little bit about that.
So it's funny that Labor of Love, today I had a interview with a body here that I'm trying to get some funding for next year's event and that kind of thing. Because this year's event, I wouldn't say it was put on hold, because I want to give people a little time to kind of catch themselves, so we can do it early next year, and because of my schedule as well too. So it's going to be in April 2025, Easter weekend in Tobago. But yeah, but I started Labor of Love in 2019. The first event was in 2019, and I was telling the lady that today on the call. She was asking me, so why do you feel like it, hasn't been sustainable? I said, I'm like, because the first event was the year before COVID. And then 2020, 2021, I had virtual events. So I actually still have those recordings. I must send them to you. It's on my YouTube. But from COVID and people being able to come again to it allowed for people. So if you would have met Lindsay, I'm not sure if you spoke to her, but you would have saw her speak at the retreat.
At the event,
Lindsay is a very good friend of mine that we met during COVID online, and now that's like my kid's auntie, and I'm her kid's auntie, and this and that.
Yes.
But it started in 2019. My birthday is Labor Day, June 19th.
Okay.
Here in Trinidad, Labor Day is celebrated on June 19th. And I always wanted to have, do something like that for my birthday where I give back. So the first event I had it in the tea party style in a venue here in Tacarigua, Trinidad. And it was good. 2020 online, 2021 online. And then 2022, I kept two, one in South, one in Arima. And 2023 is what you came to. So it was something that was about like the fifth event, but in the very early, it was kind of like just community, people that I know, family, friends of a friend of a friend, that kind of thing. Last year was the first year that I really opened it up to the public, and it was so well received. Granted, Fralene, I'll be honest with you, next one I'm working on it better. I am like, I don't ever like turn people away. So if somebody can't pay, I'm like, that's all right, still come, because I always think about the fact that somebody might come to that and they don't know how their lives would change.
Right.
So I always try, and I give God thanks that He has allowed me to have people who might say, hey, okay, I'll pay for somebody to come.
Right.
The event has not yet been profitable, but we've always had enough to break even, and it's new, it's growing.
Yeah.
I try not to have it too expensive because I want the average woman who might not be able to go, let's say, to a retreat in the Bahamas or something like that, to be able to have something they could come to and feel leaving good. I try to not make it like a paper plate kind of thing. Nothing is wrong with those things, but I want when women come that they feel special, that they feel
I get you.
good. And I'm sure you felt like that when you were there, that they feel like...
Certainly. It was lovely. Of course, maybe in my own development at all, I decided to just come by myself. I was like, oh, I see it. And I was like, okay, I don't try to convince my friend or anything like that because that would have just take time and so on. But anyway, I decided, okay, it's fine. I'll go and be a part of another community. I don't know anybody there. And when I came, of course, it was well done. We got all packages, which I thought was really, really nice, and t-shirts and all of that. And like you said, the meal and everything was well put together. So that even when I came home and I was sharing with my husband and my mother-in-law, and I was like, oh no, this was really, really nice. So yes, it was really well done.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that the long-term vision for it is that it would become a Caribbean Women's Conference where eventually we could go to different islands, partner with different women from those spaces. It's not something that is about me speaking. I try because I'm a planner. I want to be the person behind walking the room, making sure everything there in order.
Yeah.
But go to different islands, get different people. So like if you go to Barbados and there is somebody in Barbados that has a message like how I have a message, and get those people. Jamaica, same thing, and find it, and not necessarily the popular speakers, but the average woman, the everyday woman that you might pass by as an ordinary person, not knowing that they might have a remarkable story, just like how Lindsay was. You could look at her and you would never know that she has such a great testimony of being in prison and in rehab and things like that. But I think just sharing these stories of the average woman and giving them space is really what I have for the long-term vision of Labor of Love.
Excellent. I'm from Stevenson, by the way, just so you know. So if ever you think,
sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
yeah. Good.
Right. Good. So look at that. So yes, it was really lovely. And I'm looking forward to the next event and whatever else might be happening in the mix as well. So now that we mentioned this event and so on, and of course you have your other books and so, but how can the listeners support the work that you do?
So you can find me on social media, usual Instagram, Facebook, Akenna Kublal. I'm in the process. I had a website, but I shut it down because I'm doing a new one now. So soon I'll have that back up and running soon. I have a YouTube channel. I'm not really consistent with posting over there. TikTok too, not really consistent. I need to probably get a better grip of, some people gifted with that thing.
Yeah,
I am not.
I feel you. Yeah. Social media, it's just a thing that I do because I know, okay, you do it for work and all that kind of stuff, but to be consistent. So totally understand, but they'll be able to find you across there. I'll put Facebook. Your handle up. Yeah. Akenna Kublal. Excellent. And I know you said you do events and so on. There, they could just reach you through social media.
Yes, through social media or via email at akennakublal@hotmail.com. For this July and August vacation here in Trinidad, I'm planning a series of girls one-day workshops across different communities. So if they follow me on social media, they'll see that there. And then next year, the retreat is back up and running. And actually, for the retreat next year, I'm opening up because they already have people signed up. People with my circles that say, hey, I'm coming for sure. I don't care when it is. So from July, August this year, I want to have like a payment plan running. So again, remember, it's for the average woman. So that people start cutting down a little bit because it's going to be in Tobago. It's going to be a little more. It's actually a whole weekend. So from the Thursday to the Sunday. And so to give people that time to, if they want to put on a little 200, 500, something. So by the time next year rolls around, it's not something that, let's say, the woman or the mom, average mom might necessarily be able to cut out of her bills, but she can say, hey, last year I was paying for that for me.
Yes.
So once people follow me, they'll see all the updates and stuff with that.
Excellent. And I love that, right? So you cater for everybody. And like you said, so that it's not just like all sudden and once, like, okay, you can take the time to pay. And I look forward to what that experience would be like. And thank you so much for the work that you do. And in the Caribbean, and I mean even wider, because you also travel and bring awareness and really teach women, girls, everybody, I guess men as well, to really see themselves for who they are and recognize that they're worthy, right, of love and belonging.
Just in December, I was invited to St. Martin to speak at their conference, Vitiligo conference. So Trinidad is probably one of the only places that don't really have something like that, and I'm hoping in future that we can. But in December of last year, St. Martin had a vitiligo awareness and health conference, a health and wellness conference, and they spoke about vitiligo, and I was invited to speak. So again, connections with Caribbean women is so important, because that other side of the world, the US, the European side, they support each other. It's up to us in the Caribbean here to create spaces for the women to thrive, to help open up doors for one another. And I just want to commend you too on this podcast and what you're doing, because I think that is exactly what you're doing with this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you again for the work that you do, and we'll stay connected. Take care.
Yes. Okay, thank you.